We're live.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Senate Education Committee. They have Thursday, April 2nd. We got a few things on the agenda today. We're going to start with Legislative Council of Beth St. James. In half an hour to just get through a couple more sections of draft 7.1, and we're starting on section 7. I remember because you made us remember in the last meeting.
Beth St. James, Office of Legislative Council. I'm glad you remembered because I didn't. I'm just signing into YouTube or Zoom. Whatever I'm signing into.
Thank you, co-host Caroline.
Thank you.
By the way, people can see this on the agenda, but we're with Beth's later. We're going to switch into walk something useful.
Okay, so we left off on page 20 of draft 7.1. Section 7, which is Operation Model Protection. And this language is taken pretty much directly from Act 46. So nothing in this act shall be, we've gone over this before, haven't we? But we're doing a line by line walkthrough. Okay. Nothing in this act shall be construed to restrict or repeal or to authorize, encourage, or contemplate the restriction or repeal of the availability of a school district or the ability of a school district that provides for the education of all resident students in one or more grades by paying tuition on the student's behalf to continue to do that, or by operating a school offering the grade or grades to continue to do that. School operation. All governance transitions contemplated pursuant to this act shall preserve the ability of a district that provides for the education of all resident students in one or more grades by operating a school for all students in the grade or grades if it chooses to do so, and shall not require the district to pay tuition for students if it ceases to exist, as a discrete entity and realigned into a supervisory district or union school district. All governance transitions contemplated pursuant to this act shall preserve the ability of the district that provides for the education of all resident students in one or more grades by paying tuition on the student's behalf to continue to provide education by paying tuition on behalf of all students in their grade or grade if it chooses to do so, and shall not require the district to limit the options available to students if it ceases to exist as a discrete entity and realign into a supervisory district or union school district. And then nothing in this section shall prohibit school districts, regardless of their operating structure, from voluntarily merging pursuant to the processes and requirements of Chapter 11.
Okay, good.
Okay, Section 8 is evaluation by the State Board of Education. So this is these are some things that the state board is required to consider when evaluating a proposal to create a union school district, which is part of the current law process for union school district formation in Chapter 11. So we're on page 22. When evaluating a proposal to create a union school district pursuant to Chapter 11, including a proposal submitted pursuant to the provisions of Section 6 of this Act, the state board shall consider whether the proposal is designed to meet the goals set forth in Section 1 of this Act and to reduce the number of school districts as set forth in Section 6A of this Act. Be mindful of any other district in the region that may become geographically isolated, including the potential isolation of a district with low fiscal capacity or with a high percentage of students from economically deprived backgrounds as identified in 16 BSA subsection 4010D. At the request of the state board, the Secretary of Education shall work with a potentially isolated district and other districts in the region to move toward voluntary merger that does not result in such isolation. The state board is authorized to deny approval to a proposal that would geographically isolate the district that would not be an appropriate member of another governance structure in the region. Provided, however, that notwithstanding 16 VSA subdivision 709C2, the state board shall approve other mergers formed pursuant to this act that do not geographically isolate a district.
So this is an important point here, I think, that we're saying if two districts want to merge, they can merge. And the only thing that we have to be careful about, the state board is authorized to look at, is whether they are going to create more district. Okay.
Bear with, I'm sorry, I just have a moment. Apologies. So we're on section 9 now. Non-merging district proposals. This is again very similar to the process that happened in Act 46. Not exactly the same, but it's similar. On or before November 30th, 2027, the board of each school district listed in subsection 6 in section 6 subsection B that is not a member of a newly formed school district, or that does not expect to become a member of a newly formed school district on or before July 1st, 2029, either on that district's own behalf or jointly with the boards of other districts, shall submit a proposal to the Secretary of Education and the state board in which the district proposes to retain its current governance structure, to work with other districts to form a different governance structure, or to enter into another model of joint activity. Demonstrates through reference to enrollment projections, students to staff ratios, the comprehensive data collected pursuant to the education quality standard, and otherwise, how the proposal submitted pursuant to the section supports the district's or districts' ability to meet or exceed each of the goals set forth in section 1 of this act, and identifies detailed actions it proposes to take to continue to improve its performance in connection with each of the goals in section 1 of the act.
So this would then help inform the state board as we go to the next section.
Section 10, final state action. Agency of Education's proposal. In order to modernize Vermont school district governance structures to meet the goals set forth in section 1 of this act, while reducing the number of school districts located within the SUs listed in section 6 subsection B to a total of 48 districts as practical. So remember, that's the non-gray area. The secretary shall, I'm on page 24 now, review the governance structures of the school districts and supervisory unions listed in section 6 subsection B as they will exist or are anticipated to exist on July 1, 2029. The review shall include consideration of any proposals submitted by districts or groups of districts pursuant to section 9 of this act and conversations with those other districts. On or before June 1st, 2028, the secretary shall publish on the Agency of Education's website and present to the State Board of Education a proposed plan that, to the extent necessary to promote the purpose stated at the beginning of this subsection, would merge districts into larger school districts in an effort to reduce the number of school districts located within the SUs to a total of 48 school districts as practical. The agency shall only recommend merging districts with the same operating structures and districts within the same supervisory union. If it is not possible or practical to develop a proposal that realigns some districts where necessary in a manner that adheres to the protections of section 7 of this act, which is the protection for tuition paying and operating districts, then the proposal may also allow some school districts not to merge and instead to continue to exist and operate as they did as of July 1, 2026.
So the hope is that just the mergers will happen voluntarily. This section will never actually come to the end. And then, but if it does, it limits the state board to get down to 48 and the board can go beyond that. So hopefully, to the extent this section means at all, it's just the board districts that have within the 2 years.
I mean, just to split hairs a little bit.
Yeah.
they can't get it below 48?
The board can't, the board doesn't have it yet.
Okay, but
Not that-
it could happen organically.
Organically,
Okay.
anything can happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So on page 24, line 19, subdivision 3, any mergers proposed by the agency shall be based on the following consideration. School districts with small student counts shall be a priority for mergers. And I did not make that, the student count language change there to ADM, so I'll make note of that. Is it defined in the average daily membership is, we're going to use that term and that's defined, but the word small is not defined. We're leaving it.
No.
Open
That actually was making, remember last time she said if I could make the changes, you actually.
until.
Note to yourself, I think.
So I wasn't gonna make the changes we went over last week in the markup. This was the change I should have made for this draft, but
Oh,
I didn't,
oh.
so I'm making that note for next time.
And maybe I missed it, but we're gonna have a specific ADM number, or just we're gonna say small.
No, so the board would theoretically, if it comes to pass that they need to merge 7 districts or whatever,
Mhm.
they would start with this, look at the smallest districts, the smallest ADM count districts first. That's the idea.
Does that make sense? I mean, I'm just thinking, like,
It doesn't say that they have to merge small to small, because a small could get merged into a large,
Mhm.
but they will, but merging will, tiny districts probably is the price.
but do we want class size? Do we want high per pupil spending?
This,
Yeah.
with the fair discussion, but this proposes just, student count,
Small student count in their district.
merged districts and small student counts.
Okay, and it's kind of suggested. We're suggesting small.
It's, yeah, and
Okay,
that probably does go to small class size
okay,
indirectly.
yeah.
On page 25, while school districts do not need to be contiguous in order to be merged, such mergers shall take into account the geography of each applicable school district and any other geographical areas affected by a proposed merger. Will the merged school district have adequate infrastructure capacity to consolidate schools should such a need develop? That just I shall be merged, should be taken out there. Will the merger lead to improved opportunity for resident students, and will the merger lead to the potential to gain staffing and administrative efficiencies? And I have a note here that we wanted to add, will the merger result in net cost savings? Okay, so that's the agency's review. Now that review goes to the state board, and the state board makes a final plan. So on or before November 30th, 2028, the state board shall review and analyze the secretary's proposal under the provisions in subsection A of this section, may take testimony or ask for additional information from districts and SUs, shall approve the proposal either in its original form or in an amended form that adheres to the provisions of subsection A of this section, and shall publish on the agency's website to order merging and realigning districts. The board shall be prohibited from merging school districts whose operating structures differ as of July 1, 2026, and shall only order the merger of districts that are members of the same supervisory union. And then on or before November 30th, 2028, the state board is required to submit a written report to you all with recommended supervisory union boundaries that reflect the new school districts created through the voluntary merger process pursuant to Section 6 of this Act, and the board's order merging and realigning school districts pursuant to subdivision 1 of this subsection. Applicability. This section shall not apply to an interstate school district, a school district not listed in Section 6B, which is the gray area. The gray area would be the school districts that are not listed in 6B. A regional career technical center school district formed under 16 VSA Chapter 37, Subchapter 5A, or a school district that between July 1, 2026 and July 1, 2028 began to operate as a unified union school district or obtained an affirmative vote of all necessary districts to voluntarily merge into a new union school district pursuant to Section 6 of this Act. Provided, however, that as part of the state board's plan developed pursuant to subsection B of this section, state board may realign a newly formed unified union school district to include a geographically isolated district where necessary to achieve the goals of this act.
So people get that. We're saying that if you merge, two districts merge, they're left alone after that. The only exception would be if they have created a Norfolk district. And we should have taken that in the first, back a couple sections where we talked about the state, the agency, making sure that that doesn't happen. And that we're not approving. So it's just almost a reiteration. But it really is saying that if two districts merge, they don't get forced to re-merge with somebody else.
Can you remind me how many districts do we have in total again?
119 total. In the 12, I think it's 97.
I don't know.
I think it's 97.
So if this, I think highly unlikely, but if every one of them merges with at least one other district, we're down to 59 districts. And they will theoretically be left alone if they've merged. But then the State Board of Education has as a requirement to bring it down to 48. How would that work?
Well, so the 48 is within the 12. So it's 97 to 48 within the 12. But that was a separate process for the grant, everything.
Are we defining orphan district?
Geographically isolated. It's terminology in that equity things, right?
I don't want to commit to that off the top of my head. It's definitely possible. I can't remember at this moment. Okay, because I guess for me, it's more than that. Learning what we learned from Act 46, like it's an equity issue, and then a kind of like let's talk about Central Vermont. It could, I mean, in a way, it could add cost because certain districts don't want to partner with the district that's right next to them. So I don't want to limit our consideration just to geographic. I guess one of those could be considered geographic, but I want it to save money and I want it to make sure no kids get left behind.
Yeah, that's the intent with the
Okay.
geographic isolation, or not letting that happen.
Okay. I don't think geographic isolation captures it, but it could be like the spirit
Yeah.
of this somewhere else.
So it's sort of geographic isolation that results in less opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
For kids, at least kids in education. So, let's think about how to say that.
Okay.
And note that, because I think that's a good point, because that is the intent.
Right. And for like, I tried to say this to my school district, but they might want to merge with a certain other district. Let's say they want to merge with another one in Chittenden County. There might be a district in Addison County that wants to merge with our district. I guess I don't know if it would count as geographic isolation if the district closer to the SUs didn't have the ability to merge with them because they merged with somebody.
We do have a section here to allow for changes of the boundaries. And we got to over.
Okay, so like as long as it's iterative, because redistricting is very hard, it often leaves people.
Yeah, we
with
have
an
a
idea.
process here to fix that out.
Okay.
If that happens, but we're trying not to let it happen
Yeah,
with this language. But I think I like the idea of somehow when we talk about geographic isolation, tying it to opportunity for kids, because that's the reason we're worried about it.
right. It just redistricting can leave so many odd
Yep.
things like we've seen.
Chair, when you say we have a process, I wasn't tracking what process you were talking about. I just want to make sure.
For changing the boundaries of the SUs.
Well, the process is, either you change them because you're the legislature and you set them, or that charter change process. we went
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Oh,
the
okay.
change process. Yeah,
But there's no specific process for changing school district boundaries. That is just the chapter 11 process.
right.
Okay.
And that can be done voluntarily and
Yes.
any of that as long as
Yep.
you don't leave.
Yep.
So isolated.
Okay, so we are on page 26, section 11. Secretary of Education shall regularly review, evaluate, and keep the state board and general assembly apprised of the following. The discussion, studies, and activity among districts to move voluntarily toward creating new larger school districts pursuant to section 6 of this act, and the data and other information collected in connection with education quality standards and related on-site education quality reviews, including data and information regarding the equity of educational opportunities, academic outcomes, personalization of learning, a safe school climate, high quality staffing, and financial efficiency. Where is that? Page 26. Section 11. What am I looking at? We're on draft 7.1. Okay.
I won't remember the list, but I'd like to include maybe some consideration for career technical education. in there.
So just access to CTE.
Yeah, I can think more about how to frame it, but one of the problems is you might be in a catchment area for CTE that doesn't have health services, and it's very hard for you to get out of your district and go to another. Like, I just want to make sure they have a holistic access to universal CTE is a consideration, something like that.
Let's at least that.
Please.
Or some sort of finance draft there. Okay.
So we're on page 27, section 12, exploration and transition grants. So notwithstanding 16 VSA section 4025, which is the language we use when we are appropriating money out of the ed fund for one of its non-enumerated uses. So notwithstanding 16 VSA section 4025, within 15 days following the date, each transitional board of each SU created pursuant to this act holds a meeting to elect a chair and other officers. The Secretary of Education shall, from the Education Fund, pay each transitional board an SU transition facilitation grant in the amount of $250,000. Secretary. Oh,
So
go ahead.
you remember this, right? This section of why, yeah, okay.
Oh, I do.
I don't. Okay.
$4 million
Per SU, for each of the 12 SUs. It's to get them through that year and everything they're gonna have to do, hire attorneys and other things, the consultants. It's gonna take the fast you investment. That was that number is, actually, I haven't done this before this way, so that number, I think, at one point we had it been higher, I believe Jamie could already set up thinking.
Study committee grants. The Agency of Education shall, from the Ed Fund, reimburse up to $10,000 of fees paid by 2 or more school districts for facilitation, legal, and other consulting services necessary for the initial exploration of the advisability of forming a new union school district for study committees that convene pursuant to section 6 of this act on or after July 1, 2026.
That was in Act 46 as well, right?
I think it was actually Act 153.
Okay.
2010, there was a reimbursement grant and it got kind of carried along by reference in Act 156 and in Act 46.
Okay. Yes.
So what's the kind of timeline logic here between, so let's say we have 2 small districts in the gray area looking at merging, they get 10K to assist with their
I
study.
think you'd be thinking more about the 12 within the SUs. Or that, because there's
Okay, no, keep going, because I'm just trying to figure out the differentiation between why an SU would need $250,000 and 2 districts coming together would need 10,000.
so in the short run, the SU is a much bigger deal to put together because they have to even begin to hire a superintendent before the next year has started. They need to hire a consultant, it's much bigger process, and put the staff together, and do everything. And the 10,000 is just really for the, almost the talking stage of the merger, because then there's a next number in the next section. That's good. So the 10,000 is just a little bit of money that help. Okay. So the initial. Yeah.
On page 28, line 3, subdivision 3, merger support grants. After voter approval of a plan of merger that was developed by a study committee pursuant to section 6 of this act on or after July 1, 2026, the Secretary of Ed may pay the transitional board of the new Union School District a transition facilitation grant from the Ed Fund equal to the lesser of 10% of the base education amount established in 16 VSA 4001 subdivision 13, multiplied by the greater of either the combined enrollment or the average daily membership of the merged districts on October 1st of the year in which the successful vote was taken. So that's your base times ADM essentially, or $300,000. So whatever's less would be the new district's merger support grant.
Again, now we're talking about gray area. 2 or more smaller districts coming together, they've agreed amongst themselves. They've gotten through the initial 10,000 grant stage.
Yeah, although it's probably in this, we're still talking here. This is the this is the difference. And this came out of Act 46. And I believe
Merger
it
support
increased the
grants?
number a little bit.
It was 5% and 150,000 in terms of.
So what's the 40 million?
Supervisory unions. At the formation of these 12 supervisory unions.
No, it's just 300,000 for
Two districts merging, two districts, yeah, districts merging. Because they've got their own there's their own complications. And it's up to the Secretary of May. One is shall for the supervisory unions and may for the. That came out of Act 46, we just increased the number because of inflation.
And this is just voluntary.
I'm on line 14, page 28. A new school district formed pursuant to the recommendation of a study committee established pursuant to section 6 of this act on or after July 1st, 2026, shall be eligible for a grant under this subdivision 3. That's the merger support grant. If the newly formed Union School District has an average daily membership of 3,000 or more students, or at least 15 separate towns or cities located within the new district's geographical boundaries. Merger support grants shall be available through fiscal year 2032. An eligible newly formed Union School District shall only be eligible for a merger support grant pursuant to the section during the fiscal year following voter approval of a plan of merger. So one time. Page 29, honor beginning on December 1st, 2026, and annual.
By the way, I'm sorry about you. We should think more about this section. Because I think the number of those numbers may be too high. And this thing's changed the 3,000 students to 15, maybe too high for what we're actually trying to accomplish here. But let's just come back to that. Just circling.
I'm just watching the time. You have me until 2:30. Do you want to keep going with this or switch gears?
We should switch gears because I think it's important to hear the. Yeah. So if you have a chance to understand what's in the miscellaneous. So, so note where we left off.
Page 29, line 3, subdivision 4. So we're going to switch gears to a walkthrough of page 931 as passed by the House. Do you want me to share my screen?
We all had hard copies.
Okay. Are we ready? Okay. So this is an act relating to miscellaneous changes in education law. I think the reader assistance headings in this bill are really helpful because this is a miscellaneous bill, so the topics are all over the place. So section 1 is an amendment to the moratorium on approval of new independent schools that was created in the budget 2023. So subsection A was added in the budget in 2023, and it creates a prohibition on the state board from approving an application for initial approval of an approved independent school until further direction by the General Assembly. So schools that are already approved, the applications for renewal could be processed, but if it was a new initial application, the moratorium would apply.
That's current law,
So why is it?
because it's changing, C is gonna change it. I think you just left this in for reference to help people understand what's going on.
Correct.
Yeah. First two. So do what you,
We don't have an opportunity to support it or not support it. I mean, I'm not really sure what.
so we have a more, in 23, the legislature had the moratorium on new independent schools. And now what we're doing with C at the bottom of the first page is a little notwithstanding. That's all that we're doing.
For therapeutic school.
It's not to reopen that discussion. It's not that.
Subsection C notwithstands subsections A and B, and it says that the moratorium on approval of a new approved independent school shall not apply to changes in ownership of therapeutic approved independent schools. If submission of an application for initial approval of an approved independent school is required as the result of a change in ownership of a therapeutic approved independent school, that at the time of the change in ownership is already approved by the state board, and the school will remain a therapeutic approved independent school after the change in ownership is complete, then the moratorium does not apply, and the Agency of Education and State Board of Education are required to process the application according to applicable state and federal law.
Yes,
Would it be correct to summarize it as if there's a change in ownership of a therapeutic school, it doesn't initiate, or it doesn't walk into the territory of the moratorium, and so they can change ownership without.
Yes, there's more requirements. So it's a change of, so it has to be a therapeutic approved independent school. It's a change of ownership. The school has to already be approved by the state board, and it has to remain an approved, it has to remain a therapeutic school after the change in ownership. And the way I've been kind of thinking of this is this language would get that application in the door. Like the moratorium is a door that is shut. This language would open the door for the application to begin. And then this language does nothing about whether or not all of the other requirements in order for the application to be processed are met. It's just getting in the door for that initial application to be reviewed under applicable state law.
would this allow a change from a for-profit to a nonprofit? Okay.
So if you look at subsection B, which you added last year, a change in either tax status or conversion to a nonprofit organization by a therapeutic approved independent school, absent any other change, it shall not affect the approval status of the school. So that is essentially saying a new initial application wouldn't even be triggered in a change in tax status.
I'll just raise this since we have it and may have time to go into the issue, but I personally don't see the need for the moratorium on therapeutic schools at all. We have a shortage. I wasn't here for the testimony that led to the moratorium, but I do have friends in my district who are told their kids are not suitable for the local school and they have no option.
Well, let's make a note.
Okay. I'd like to
Yeah, I don't-
relitigate that.
I go one step further. I don't believe in moratorium at all. It's
Maybe
anti-competitive.
that's why.
But I support exactly what center on instead of set.
in this process in place to, or to become a therapeutic. school. Right? On the measure.
Yeah, I don't want us to come next year and say, oh, so if you want to become this kind of therapeutic school, it's okay. Like, I haven't gotten the sense.
Okay.
We have too many units.
Could that be because we basically said that we're not going to improve anymore in the kind of school? Improve this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially, yeah.
Therapeutic school is a good type of school.
So now we're
Saying no on
accepting,
one hand, yes,
now we're accepting that from the group. And I. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so section 2 is several pages, and in the interest of time, I think I can just summarize it very quickly. Section 2 is Vermont adopting the Interstate Compact for Education. So you all have had folks from the Education Commission of the state come in and testify in front of you many times, and that is the Interstate Compact for Education. Vermont was a member of the Interstate Compact for several years until the early 90s when we withdrew. I do not know why we withdrew, but we have been paying dues sporadically since then. And we have been sending commission members sporadically since then. Section 2 would just be Vermont readopting the Interstate Compact for Education, becoming a member of the compact. This language is almost exactly the same as it was when we withdrew in the 90s. I think we're one of 2 states that are not currently members. So that's all section 2 does.
what does the interstate compact do for us?
Well, I don't know that I can answer that question, but I can refer you to the language. I think the on page 2, line 11, or line 12, it is the purpose of this compact to. I think this is the best summary you're going to get. So establish and maintain close cooperation and understanding among executive, legislative, professional education, and lay leadership on a nationwide basis at the state level, forum for discussion, clearinghouse for information, etc.
Quick question. This may be a question for Representative Conlon, but I'm not opposed to the concept just based on what I heard, but it seems pretty substantive for a miscellaneous bill. Is there any background as to why it's not an independent bill? It didn't seem like a technical change.
I don't think I did.
So that's an interesting question. The miscellaneous bill is not labeled as a technical corrections bill. So I think historically miscellaneous education bills have just been a bit of a Christmas tree. I think every subject matter treats their miscellaneous bills a little differently. But I don't think there's anything in this bill that comports it to be just technical corrections. I take your point, and I do think that is a question for Rep. Conlon as to why this language didn't travel on its own.
Thank you.
we had last year's, not making that. One way or the other, but last year's bill had a lot of substance in it.
Trying to do that, Senate, the judiciary.
Doesn't work over there.
Led council again, just didn't respond to that.
Yeah, I don't have any feelings on it right now.
So I'm, again, in the interest of time, we're gonna skip through reading the compact line by line. And we are gonna jump to page 14. Just to point out that sections 3 through 12 were deleted.
3 to 12 of what?
The bill,
Oh, okay. Oh, I said first was introduced.
correct,
Okay,
right? This is the as passed
Right,
by
right, yeah.
the House version.
okay.
The language that used to live in section 3 to 12 was just voted out of House Education an hour ago. And that was related to changing the name of BOCES to seesaws. So get ready to say seesaw over and over and over again. Page 15, new reader assistance heading class size minimums. Section 13 amends Act 73, Section 7 on line 13. I'll just read it. So notwithstanding 16 VSA, Section 165, subdivision A9C and subsection B, which is language that you all added last year in Act 73 for class size minimums. A school's failure to comply with the class size minimum requirements contained in 165A9 shall not count towards the 3 consecutive school years of non-compliance that enables the secretary to recommend action to the state board until the state board adopts updates to the EQS rules to reflect the class size minimums, or July 1st, 2027, whichever date shall come first. There was the class size minimums and statute take effect July 1, 2026. The state board was required in Act 73 to update the education quality standards to reflect the addition of those class size minimums to the education quality standards on or before, I think, August 1st, 2026 or 2027. Anyway, there was a disconnect between when the statute took effect and when rulemaking was the last day for rulemaking to occur. And this is meant to just say, essentially a hold harmless. Right now, when class size minimums take effect on July 1, 2026, the Secretary of Education may recommend action to the state board if someone is not in compliance with class size minimums over the course of 3 consecutive school years. So this is saying that clock doesn't start ticking until those rules are in place, or July 1, 2027, whichever shall come first.
Recall the state board raised this as an issue in the section. You may not recall what they did.
Do you recall their logic?
Well, I actually didn't think it was a particular issue because even though the rules came in later, we started the clock. But then as long as the rules were in place during that 3 years, I just thought the clock, it didn't matter, but they found it to be an issue, and this is just resolving it by pushing it out of there. It was a problem in their head, not necessarily mine, but whatever.
Page 16, section 14, background checks. This is adding section 14 as a brand new section to Title 16. This section 25.4a would be nestled right in with the other background check language in section 16 or in Title 16 related to superintendents and school district employees or contractors. And this language requires the Agency of Education to request criminal record information for a person the secretary is prepared to recommend for any full-time, part-time, or temporary employment or contractual relationship with the agency, if such person will have or has the potential to have unsupervised contact with students. After signing a user agreement, the secretary shall make a request for criminal records directly to BCIC, or a request made under subsection B of the section shall be accompanied by a release signed by the applicant on a form provided by BCIC and a set of the applicant's fingerprints. The agency shall pay the fingerprinting fee and shall pay any fee required by the FBI associated with a fingerprint supported criminal record check. And the release form to be signed by the applicant shall include a statement informing the applicant of the right to challenge the accuracy of the record by appealing to the BCIC pursuant to rules adopted by the Commissioner of Public Safety, and Secretary of Education's policy regarding maintenance and destruction of records, and the applicant's right to request that record or notice be maintained for purposes of using it to comply with future criminal record checks, requests made pursuant to section 256 of this title.
That's all.
This is all new language. This language is copied almost exactly from section 254 in Title 16, which is for superintendents, background checks for superintendents. Upon completion of a criminal record check, BCIC shall send to the secretary a notice that no record exists, or if a record exists, a copy of any criminal record. And if a copy of a criminal record is received, the secretary is required to forward to the applicant and shall inform the applicant in writing of the right to challenge the accuracy, and then that maintenance and destruction of records policy. Secretary is also required to request and obtain information from the Child Protection Registry, maintained by DCF, and from the Vulnerable Adult Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation Registry, maintained by DALE, for any applicant for whom a criminal record check is required. The departments for DCF and DALE shall adopt rules in accordance with 3 VSA Chapter 25, governing the process for obtaining this information. And then an applicant convicted for a sex offense that requires registration pursuant to 13 VSA Chapter 167, Subchapter 3 shall not be eligible for employment with the agency. Again, this language is almost verbatim from record check requests or record check requirement language related to school district employees and superintendents. This is for agency of education employees or contractors, but only those who would have the potential to have or will have unsupervised contact with students. And then section 15 is just adding, this is that section that was referred to up in the section beforehand regarding maintenance of records for a new record, so a new records request, so future criminal record check requests, just adding the agency of education on line 20, and then on page 19, line 1, adding the agency of education in the list of employers who this section would apply to, now that they are also doing background checks.
So what does this actually do? Just what issue is it solving?
This is a request made by the agency. And I have heard anecdotally some of the reasons why some of the background check piece is coming forward, but I think that's better testimony to give your witnesses. And then the effective date for the entire bill is July 1, 2026.
Questions for on this? Do we have rep comment coming in at 2:30? Do we want to actually switch it back? We happy for 10 more minutes?
That's your choice.
Yeah, switch
Okay.
back to the bill. Each
29.
29.
So we're on page 29, draft 7.1, line 3, subdivision 4, beginning on December 1st, 2026, and annually thereafter until December 1st. Ooh, that's a big typo. 2031. The Agency of Education shall submit a written report to the Education and Money Committees with information regarding contemplated and active school district mergers and a proposed appropriation amount for the applicable fiscal year to cover the costs associated with the grants created pursuant to this section. So some of the grants that we just walked through are going, the amount of money you need for those grants is going to be dependent on the activity that's happening in the field. You're not going to be able to know that just sitting in these chairs without taking testimony. So this subdivision is meant to ask for the agency to collect the information you would need in order to make appropriate appropriation. The report shall include a list of districts, school districts that are members of active study committees, the date the study committee was formed and the status of any such study committee, a list of anticipated new union school districts that are likely to be formed during the applicable fiscal year, and the forming members and anticipated average daily membership of each, and proposed appropriation amounts for study committee grants and merger support grants for the applicable fiscal year based on the merger activity observed in the field. The agency shall include recommended appropriation amounts for SU transition facilitation grants, study committee grants, and merger support grants as part of its budget submitted to the governor. And then page 30, section 13. are the appropriations to go along with all of the grants that we just walked through
For this coming fiscal year.
for this coming fiscal year. And then subsection D does allow the funds to carry forward until fully expended or reverted. So 2.75 million for supervisory union transition facilitation grants, 50,000 for study committee grants, and 600,000 for merger support grants.
So, okay, so just so the 275 includes 250 for each of the 12 SUs. And then it anticipates 5 expenditures of 10,000 as districts begin to do the work. And it anticipates 2 drawing down the 300,000 or some portion thereof as they're actually approaching. So there's assumptions in there. Just want you to know what they are and then weigh that number as a placeholder for us to have a little bit further discussion. Make sure those assumptions make sense. Well, I'll say no, but if this passes, the 12 times the 250 will be there by definition. And then the question is the 5 times 10 the right number, or and then the 2 actual mergers take place next year. So those are the underlying assumptions. So
Foundation formula, we're in a new reader assistance heading. Section 14 amends section 401 subdivision 16 as it will exist under the foundation formula. It amends the base amount, which has passed in Act 73 with $15,033 to $16,780. And it asks for the inflator to be applied to the base amount on page 31 from fiscal year 27 forward instead of from fiscal year 25 forward.
and we're gonna, yes,
How do we come up with that?
the larger base was, and the number is gonna change. We're gonna, by the time we get together on Tuesday, that number will be a little bit different. But the basic theory is that the 15033 was tied to 2024. And since then, we've had increases of, it's based on increases of 5.5 and 5.5. So we took the 15033, multiplied times 5.5, then multiplied again by 5.5. The difference is going to be that actually the 5.5 is high. The second 5.5 is actually high because budgets came in lower than that. So that number will come down a little bit. And the idea behind the whole thinking is that with the 15033 tied to 2024, as that gets multiplied out by NEPA, which is a little bit 3 or a little bit less, and then without having the base get higher to where we actually have been spending, there's going to be a cliff. And that cliff's going to be a problem for some districts. We're creating a cliff, but we don't fix it. That's the, and we're going to see detail behind this on Tuesday.
The next the last substantive section is on page 31, section 15. It amends the effective date section from Act 73, and it removes the contingencies for the effective dates. So for subdivision or for subsection E, it's removing the contingency related to school district boundaries. And for subsection F, it's removing the contingency for the foundation formula and all the other subdivisions in this section to take effect, and bumping the date out from July 1, 2028 to July 1, 2029. So there would no longer be contingencies for the foundation formula to take effect. It would just take effect on July 1, 2029. And then the effective dates are July 1, 2026 for everything except for section 14, which is the base change amount. That would take effect on July 1, 2029, along with the rest of the foundation formula.
Questions? See a new draft I could get when
I think you have me in tomorrow at 3.
Good?
Great.
Okay. We have 3 minutes to stand up.